friends, welcome to my September wrap-up part 1. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 7 works that I finished in the first half of September. Like I did in my previous wrap-ups, I will insert the clips that I recorded very soon after I finished those works. Today is the 2nd of September. I DNF'd one book yesterday and finished one short story today. The book that I DNF'd was the book that was chosen for my real life book club. Çift, Yürek, Mutant Message Down Under by Marlo Morgan. There was some controversy about this book. First being promoted as non-fiction, and then it was found out that it was a fiction story. It was then revised as a fiction work. To be honest, I was a bit prejudiced about the book because of this fact, but I tried to keep my prejudices aside and decided to give this book a chance. But I could read only 20 pages, which is very rare that I DNF a book at 20 pages. I really hated the didactic tone of the book and how it was trying to glorify one kind of living, whereas really trashing the modern way of living. And being a fan of modern technology and modern way of living, I really felt annoyed by the didactic tone of the author. I also understood why the Aborigines said that this book was not true, although it was appearing to be glorifying their way of living. It was actually really stereotyping them and looking at them from a very cliche Western type of view. So I decided not to bother with this book, which would certainly frustrate me if I read more, and decided to DNF Mutant Message Down Under at the first day of September. The short story that I finished was a e-arc that I received from Book Sirens for an honest review. A Word of Advice by Joe Richardson. And I read this for autumnamour. The theme of the first week was contemporary or historic, and this was a contemporary romance short story. In this short story, our heroine, who's an advanced columnist, goes through an emotional meltdown when she finds out that her boyfriend of 1 year has cheated on her, and she unfortunately had this meltdown during a radio podcast when she was interviewed. And after this horrifying experience, she goes through a bar and her life changes at that bar. I gave this short story 3 stars because I thought the emotions developed very quickly for my taste. It was a short story and it had to be done that way, but maybe the short story formats and the romance genre do not fit together, at least in my opinion. This short story should have been at least a novella size to make me feel glad for the character. On the other hand, Joe Richardson's writing style was very decent, and I'm open to reading longer romance stories from this author. Today is the 4th of September, and I finished Eileen by Ottessa, Moshfegh. I read this book for the Killer Reads Book Club, which is hosted by AJ Dan Reads and Writes. In this book, Eileen Dunlop is a young woman who lives with her father and works at a prison for boys. And the story takes place in 1960s. Eileen is a very unhappy woman who has very strange dreams, and her ultimate dream is to escape from this town. The story is told from the point of view of the future Eileen, who left the town eventually, and we follow the events leading up to her eventual departure from the town. This was not a very conventional thriller. I even thought of recording this book's genre as historical fiction. But the last quarter of the book had elements of a domestic thriller. I have to admit those parts were the most interesting parts for me. I have to say I really had struggled reading some of the sections about the amount of dirt and messiness and gore that was present in the life of Eileen. I'm not obsessively clean or anything, but some sections really made my stomach very ill. I found the character of Eileen very disturbed and having illusions, and she clearly had some kind of mental illness. But on the other hand, the writing and the creation of the character was very strong. That was the sole reason that I did not DNF this book, especially in the first half of the book. It's very interesting that this book won the Booker Prize. I would advise this book only if you are very interested in being in the mind of a very disturbed individual and how her mind functions. One of the listeners in my audiobook application tagged this book as a feel-bad book, and I think that was a very good description of this book. Overall, because of the very decent quality of writing and creating such a complex character, I gave this book a 6 out of 10. Today is the 6th of September, and yesterday late at night I finished Mouse 2, A Survivor's Tale, and Here My Troubles Began by Spiegelman, the second volume in the duology. In this graphic biography, Spiegelman tells the story of how he interviewed with his father, who was a survivor of Auschwitz, both including the timeline that he interviewed with his father, as well as his past in the camp. And the most interesting thing about this graphic work is that all races are displayed by using the head of a different animal. The Jews are portrayed as rats, Germans as pigs, and the Americans as dogs, and so on. I read the first volume of this duology about, I think, 3 months ago, and gave it 7 out of 10. And I gave the second book in the duology the same rating. The main reason that I did not enjoy this graphic work as much as many of the other booktubers did was that I really struggled with the drawing style of putting a mouse's head on a person. It was really hard for me to look at it while reading it. And that really decreased my enjoyment level. On the other hand, the story was much more dramatic than the first one. I actually admired the survival ability of Spiegelman's father. Although lots of luck was involved, his survival instinct was at best. By reading the second book in the duology, I finished another series that I'm currently in the middle of, which is of course great for the month which I'm doing, series September. Today is the 7th of September, and I finished the second work that I was reading for the first week of autumnamour. I read a graphic novel which can be considered as a contemporary romance, Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, Volume 1. This was also the booktuber recommendation from Gaia Athena. I picked her name in the month of July, but I decided to keep this romance graphic novel, especially for this readathon. And in this graphic novel, Charlie, who's in the 10th grade, and Nick, who's in 11th grade, do become friends when they both play in the same team, and we see their relationship turning from acquaintances to friends to best friends, and then More Than Friends. And surprisingly, the graphic novel ended with a mini cliffhanger. And since I have the second volume, I think I will read the second volume very soon. Most probably it will be another book for autumnamour read-at-all. Anyway, I really did like this young adult contemporary romance. I'm a big fan of slow-paced romances. This one had a very slow-paced, which gave the characters time to really analyze their feelings and the consequences of those feelings actually. With this quality, the romance was both sweet and sometimes bittersweet. I really liked the characters Nick and Charlie. They had very different qualities while they were compatible, which made them a great pair. Aside from the story, I thought the drawing style was very fitting to the atmosphere of the book. I really liked choosing different panels for portraying the different emotions of the characters. For example, when they were feeling blue and very low, the panel got smaller and smaller, which was, I think, a great portrayal of feeling on a two-dimensional plane. In summary, it was a very, very decent romance story, as well as a very successful application of graphic novel, in my opinion, of course. And I gave Heartstopper by Alice Oseman, Volume 1, an 8 out of 10. Today is the 10th of September, and I finished the book that I was reading for the second week of autumnamour. It was a relatively clean book for the prompt of a sweet romance book. Just One of the Guys by Kristan Higgins. In this book, we follow Chastity, who comes back to her hometown to pursue a career in journalism. She works in the local newspaper and is determined to find romance because she feels like she is being late to the party. While doing a story for the local heroes, she interviews a very handsome, very eligible doctor, and they start a relationship. But Chastity feels conflicted because of her very strong feelings towards Trevor, who has been her best friend, as well as being the honorary son of the family. And we follow Chastity and her very large family with 4 brothers as the book progresses. I really did like the characters in this book, especially the family bond, which is one of my favorite things about Kristan Higgins books. I sort of identified with Chastity because I was sort of like that when I entered in my 30s. I desperately wanted to find a companion and tried many dates. I also found the romance story to be very believable. It was really hard to let go of a very eligible man when you don't know what the future will bring. On the other hand, for the first time in a Kristan Higgins book, I really did not like the humor in the pages. I found it to be a bit immature, and although, like I said before, I really like the sections about the love story and the family dynamic in the book, I gave this book a bit lower rating than I usually do with Kristan Higgins books, which is 7 out of 10. But I would still advise this book because you might like the humor much better than I did. It is quite a decent romance book. Today is the 11th of September, and I finished the non-fiction book that I was reading for my real life book club, Masumiyet İstasyonu by Deniz, Zeyrek. This non-fiction book consists of newspaper articles by this journalist and author, selected from the ones that includes anecdotes about his childhood in the city of Kars, as well as ones related to the life in that city and the neighboring cities in the eastern Anatolia. I thought it was a very decent selection of short stories, and not having visited that city yet, it was very interesting, and it was also very enlightening how that journalist, which I do like his ideas very much, has been raised so much different from my own life. To be honest, I have never been a fan of compilation of books consisting of newspaper articles. I always prefer a longer narrative, even non-fiction. So I gave Masumiyet İstasyonu by Deniz, Zeyrek a 7 out of 10. Today is the 13th of September and I finished Ali ve Ramazan by Perihan Mağden. This book was also translated to English as Ali and Ramazan. And I will make a very detailed Turkish chef video about this book. I'm guessing that it will be the video just after this wrap up. This book was heavily inspired by an event which happened in the mid-90s, which involved a male sex worker. We follow the lives of two young boys who meet at orphanage in 1980s. They become very good friends. When he was 11 or 12, Ramazan has been abused by the principal of the orphanage. He falls into a deep depression which causes him to be a child sex worker. After he becomes very close with Ali and then they become lovers. He tries to change his life, but because the Turkish government does not support the male children in the orphanage after they turn 18, he goes back to being a sex worker. But at the same time, he also starts living with Ali, and we follow their very eventful lives, which includes abuse, violence, passionate love, toxic love, and many other things, as well as learning the realities of the male sex workers in Istanbul. This book was a very impactful book for me because it takes place in an environment which is entirely different from my own life. Even though I knew the existence of male sex workers, of course, I did not know what kind of circumstances could lead them to choose that way of living. It was also different to read about a very toxic love, which is something that I rarely see at this level. I did not enjoy reading this book, but I was fascinated to read about the raw and very bitter details about especially Ramazan's life. Like the previous books I read from her, I really do like Perihan Mağden's writing style. In summary, I gave Ali ve Ramazan by Perihan Mağden an 8 out of 10. So those were the 7 works that I finished in the first half of September. Please comment down below, have you read any of the books that I mentioned in this video? And if you're a new viewer, first of all, welcome. Please like and subscribe. Hope to see you very soon. Bye. As for Turkish word of the day, I'm going to choose survive. Survive means hayatta kalmak in Turkish, and hayatta kalmak are our Turkish words of the day. Have a good day.